Good morning, everybody. I got to get out from behind the podium. You remember that saying you've probably heard from time to time, everything in life I needed to know, I learned in kindergarten? Well, I'm going to paraphrase that a little bit for you. I want to give a shout out to some of the schools that I attended during my time in the North Country. I started out in St. Peter's Elementary in Plattsburgh. So where's Seton Central? All right, Seton. And in Seton, well, in its predecessor, St. Peter's, I had a pretty good founding in some basic ethics. I really did. And as a child, all of you, I'm sure, had some exposure to some sense of values and ethics. And that's incredibly important. It's a very, very important piece of who you are and who you're going to develop into as you graduate from school and move on in life. After elementary school, I went over to Beekmantown. Where's the Eagles? All right. And it was in my time in the town of Chazy, growing up in West Chazy, when I first learned the value of diplomacy, because I was one of the few people in West Chazy that wasn't related by blood, and I was so my little brother and I, we had our hands full on the playground. You know, from time to time there would be scrapes, as I'm sure there are in any playground, and scuffles and whatnot. And we learned something. We learned something the hard way, that if you're the only one there who's not part of the extended family, you're going to get your butt whooped. So we learned the hard way to exercise diplomacy and to try to avoid violence when possible. And those lessons began in kindergarten, yes, but they continued on through my formative years. And it was in my sophomore year, I finished my freshman year in Beekmantown, and my sophomore year, I went over, I'm still an Eagle, okay, but I went and left the Beekmantown Eagles and I became a Chazy Eagle. Let's hear it for Chazy. All right. Thank you. So actually, I represented Beekmantown at Model UN first, and then later, Chazy. My little brother, well, he was a runner. You know, I had a lot of guts. I call it courage, but my little brother, he's a track runner. He ran cross country. So he stayed at Beekmantown, even though we had moved to the village of Chazy. And so my brother and I were in this very room in 1986 debating one another. I was blessed to represent the United States. My brother got his ass whooped. I mean, sorry. I took him to task because he represented the Soviet Union at the time. It was great. I had a blast. My brother was furious. In fact, when I talk to him to this day, he's still annoyed with me. So the point is, folks, you've come from a very rich cultural background here in the North Country. It's a down-to-earth place where solid values are still passed on from one generation to the next. And it may sound like a lot of hoo-ha when you hear that, but I'll tell you something. The skills that you're going to bring with you out of your youth in the North Country are going to be incredibly valuable as you move on. So where did those life lessons come into play later? Well, somewhere along the line in my senior year or junior year, I kind of figured out that being a partisan extremist and viewing the entire world through the prism of are they for us or against us, or viewing it through the prism of Republican versus Democrat or conservative versus liberal, I started to figure out that that wasn't really very effective when it came to girls. So at some point I figured out that there was more to life than viewing the world through the lens of conflict. And that's when I got recruited into the volunteer fire department and started to give of myself in Chazy. And I'll tell you what, it was quite an eye-opener to go to places, to people's homes in the North Country that I'd never been, to meet people I'd never met, and to work together for the common good, selflessly, without any pay, just helping people in time of need. Well, on a very different plane, that's essentially what the United Nations does. And it's what you're here to learn how to do today. And well, not necessarily to learn, because obviously some of you have mastered these things, but to develop and to practice. You're learning to work towards the common good, to put the needs of yourself and your own small group in this world to one side, and to place a priority on the needs of the larger group, humanity as a whole. It's awesome. It's an awesome thing to learn. It's an awesome thing to put into practice. One word I would caution you is not to get too intoxicated with the fervor of anti-Americanism that you can sometimes adopt when you represent, let's say, the Soviet Union like my brother did, or become an apologist for your nation. This is the greatest country on the planet, I'm convinced. Now that said, I'm not going to ask for a repeat of 1986 when I got everybody in this room going, USA, and my brother was furious. But what we represent in this world is phenomenal. We represent freedom and liberty, all kinds of good things. You know what they are. You don't have to apologize for that. Do we always get it right in our interactions with other nations? No. I've made lots of mistakes in my life, but my intentions are usually good. You know, sometimes I might have made a mistake along the way, but I'm usually trying to do the right thing when I trip over something. And that could probably be said for most of you. Along with the skills in diplomacy and conflict resolution that you're practicing during this conference, you're also learning how to communicate one-on-one well with other human beings. You're developing the ability to write, to read, to communicate, and to think on an entirely different level than you've been thinking before. It's an incredibly eye-opening experience, and my hats are off to the organizers of the Model United Nations program for giving you folks such a tremendous gift, such an enriching experience as part of your education. These gifts will carry you well in life. I never set out to become a writer or an author. I actually set out quite the opposite. I decided to walk away from a life of politics and history and civics and changed. My original major was going to be political science and history. I changed that. I got into the fire department and I learned about helping other people and eventually went into nursing. And I'm a registered nurse today, in addition to being a firefighter. For me, that held more reward. I felt better about what I was doing by helping others. But those skills that I developed along the way, the ability to write, to read, to observe history, to put history that I was seeing on the battlefield, living history that I was experiencing and a part of, to take that history and put it into words in a page, in a book, and share that with the rest of the world was something that I learned how to do right here in this room in the 80s and in my formative years in St. Peter's and Beekmantown and in Chazy. Remember that you may not choose to be a writer. You may choose an entirely different path of life, but you will be a well-educated, articulate witness to history, and you never know. You never know when you may be the one called upon to record what you've seen or experienced for the benefit of the rest of mankind. So as you go through this conference, again, remember that you're role-playing, okay? You're actors. Try not to get too wrapped up in all the rhetoric that other nations are going to throw at the United States. You can stay in your role, it's cool. You can pretend like the United States is not cool for a few days, but we all know the truth. Take these lessons and do well with them. This is a fantastic opportunity. You guys represent the very best that this world has to offer. The small towns that make up Clinton County, and I don't know, got any schools from outside of Clinton County? Essex County? Played a lot of you guys in soccer. I guess that's still big in Chazy from what I hear. Sorry about losing the state championship. I had to Google that on the way over. All right, anyway. The point is, folks, you guys represent something that is incredibly valuable in passing the values of our nation on from your parents and grandparents, your communities, onto your own children someday, and your neighbors and the rest of our culture. You've got an upbringing in a really good, solid place, and I encourage you to go out into whatever it is that life takes you to and share those values and be a shining example of the best that the North Country has to offer. My hats are off to you, folks. Good luck.